Okay, so I think we're live. Welcome, everyone. Roz, we're here with our panelists today, and Marilyn Struthers, Tara Hunt, Andrew Sigbert, Brian Saunderson, and we have Christy Deer and Marilyn Struthers also helping with some of the facilitation. My name's Liz Reichert, and I'm going to be your host today. So we have people joining. I can't see the numbers joining yet, so I think we'll give it a minute before we actually get started. Roz, do you want to?
Yeah, we're at about 28, and okay. For those of you who are new today, we're going to be having a variety of speakers. I'll introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. Rosalind Morrison. I'm chairing the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay, and the Institute does nothing on our own. We're a big believer in collaboration. And I am grateful for the collaboration and partnership that we are receiving from the town of Collingwood from the get-go. Thank you. And On the Bay magazine, the new classical 102.9 FM, and our most recent partner, the Municipality of Meaford. And people ask the question often, what is the Institute's footprint? And I just want to say that our work has covered and involved people from Owen Sound to Meaford, the Blue Mountains, Grey Highlands, Collingwood, Wasaga, Clearview, and all the way to Midland. So we're looking for people who want to get involved, people who want to make a difference. Today is part 3 in the series, Strategic Investments, Municipal Collaboration for Recovery. And I'll turn it back over to you, Liz.
Okay, that's great. So just a technical reminder that we are in webinar mode for this Zoom call today. So the people you can see on the screen are the people who either are facilitating or are presenting today. And for attendees, you can join in the chat. As you'll see in the chat line, there's a welcome message there. Just a reminder that when you do post, you choose all panelists and attendees. So at the bottom where you type your message in, there's a little blue drop-down arrow there. And you can switch between sending a message to panelists or sending a message to a panelist and all attendees. We encourage everyone to post to everyone so everyone can see what's going on. And just a reminder that you may need to switch that when we get started. Okay, so where are we at with numbers joining now, Roz? How are we doing?
We look like we're about 33. Okay. And I thought that maybe I would introduce the facilitators for those people who are new today. Okay. We have a wonderful design team working on this series.
Shall I switch that slide up? Shall I put that up?
Sure, thank you. You've been listening to Liz Reichert, who is a systems change facilitator working on complex problems. She is joined by Marilyn Struthers. Marilyn's a longtime resident of Gray and Bruce who works with emerging practices in the social sector as a facilitator, research, funder, and organizational coach. And we also have Christy Deer, who is owner and brewmistress of the Collingwood Kombucha Company and also freelances as an integral facilitator. So I'm grateful for that super facilitation team. And I'd also like to acknowledge additional design team members who have made this series possible. We have Institute board members, Susan Cook, Nancy Griffin, and Yvonne Hamlin. And in addition to that, we have Jody Kennedy, Andrew Palmer, June Porter, and Jeff Shear. Thank you all. Over to you, Liz.
Okay, so the way this is going to unfold today is we are going to just do a quick review of some of the things that we've talked about in session 1 and 2 for those of you who haven't been able to participate in those. And for those who have been, welcome back. Really glad to have you with us. And it'll just be a reminder of the things that we've been talking about. And you'll see there are some common themes that are really starting to emerge as we move forward. So hopefully we'll build on that today and on our next one on the 24th of June. After we do that review, we're going to hear from Dean Holland. He's done a song for us and he'll introduce it. So that will be up next, and then we'll have a presentation from Marilyn Struthers on strategic investments, and then we'll hear from our four panelists. So that's how it's going to unfold. At the end, there'll be an opportunity also for attendees to give us lots of insights. We've got some key questions for you to reflect on. And we'll be gathering all of those recommendations and action items and including them in the summary notes and report that we'll be preparing and putting on the website for the Institute. So that's how it's going to unfold. So let me just move now, unless Roz, I'll just check in with you. Is there anything else I should cover before we do the summary? Anybody else? Great. Okay, off we go. So here's the quick summary. Okay, that's not the way to advance the slide. Okay, this is how I'm going to do it. No, that's not how I'm going to do it. There, practice makes perfect. So in session one, which was using social innovation to inspire regional resilience, one of the participants shared with us that this is an unprecedented situation that's created a crack in the foundations. And of course, as Leonard Cohen said, that's how the light gets in. And we thought that was a good theme to kind of work with. And we recognized as the COVID-19 has revealed those cracks in our systems, that systems actually cross geographic and social lines, and that it's important for everyone to be working together. No one person, no one organization, no one municipality has all the, or government overall, has all the solutions. It's really in collaboration that we're going to be able to do this together. And we want to move forward in thinking about how municipalities, business sector, nonprofit charitable sector, and philanthropic sector can all work together to do that. We also heard that people want leaders to use this crisis that's been created by the pandemic to really push harder for a regional approach to things. That while it's important that, that local towns and villages maintain their unique character, are recognized for their individual local context, I think people are worried about and fearful for the way of life and for our planet, and that we really need to now move ahead in working together. And so I think the last point on that one was that, is there a way for us to create a common platform to start to do some sharing across municipalities, between organizations? And we're starting to see some clusters of that start to happen within the social service sector and with different municipalities working on common events and ways of doing things. I just saw the note about how Canada Day is going to unfold between Town of Blue Mountains and the village and the town of Collingwood. It's an interesting example. It was in Collingwood today. Okay, so the next one, session two, was about thinking about a collective arts and culture strategy. And I will say that both of these sessions were building on sessions that the Institute hosted last fall. And we had some key reports to share with that, and that content was still very relevant as we start thinking about mapping the road to recovery. So the big key theme that came out of the Arts and Culture Strategy session was the need to move ahead on the creation of a regional arts and culture strategy. And we do have people now actively working on that. We had, I think, 34 people from the last group that signed up who are interested in putting their hands up and say, I want to get involved in this. So we have Susan Cook from Blue Mountain Foundation for the Arts, and others are actively going through those lists and figuring out how to move the structural pieces, get those in place to actually get that strategy underway and start getting people involved in working together on that. We also heard about the importance of data and how data really both helps to tell a story, provides the evidence, but also demonstrates how our communities are so dependent on arts and culture. And there were some good examples that were shared. So I'm not going to go through all of these. They're up on the screen. And these slides will be shared on the Institute's website, so you'll be able to get access to them. So for example, 65% of Ontario business leaders say that a thriving arts and culture scene make it easier to attract top talent to their communities. We also heard that, I'm just going to move these, on a provincial level, the arts and culture sector represented $2.75 billion dollars, or 3.7% of GDP. So collectively, that is more than the utilities, larger than the utilities industry, mining, quarrying, gas extraction, and agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting industries combined. So it really shows how important those pieces are. I think also the person who comes, who's an arts and culture tourist or visitor to the community, spends about twice as much when they come. And we also heard from Grey Bruce that a survey that they did, the local charities and nonprofit organizations have really been challenged by what's happened. 87% of respondents revealed that the cancellation of fundraising events is really going to put them in a difficult place. And that 40% of the organizations are facing financial difficulty. So it gives you a glimpse of some of the things that, if we had a really clear data strategy overall for recovery and understanding what would be the indicators, how would we know if we were making progress? What would be the things that we all collectively could be looking at and working on, and then go away in our individual or collective way to really start working on those things and be able to see how we're actually making progress and managing things over time. We also heard the need to think about arts and culture as an ecosystem, that it's quite complex and that it crosses across all the boundaries between business and the public sector. In terms of critical next steps, we heard the possibility of taking an approach called collective impact, which looks at bringing 5 elements together, which I think will resonate with everyone: finding a common agenda, finding that shared measurement and understanding the data and progress, identifying the mutually reinforcing activities that we can all engage in, but that we don't necessarily all have to do together, that actually that diversity can be a very helpful thing. Really good continuous communication and the support of a backbone organization. And finally, the need to take, and also the need to take inventory of the talent pools, assets, and resources. So take a broad look at this with arts and culture, and that it's including art galleries, restaurant facilities, hotels, staff, and staff housing. And finally, we heard the important role that arts and culture plays in supporting us all with a sense of well-being. So much, many of us turn to arts and culture to find that. I was actually listening today to a piece about a new poetry book that's been put together all by poets that have written poems since COVID hit. Anyway, I'll see if I can find that reference and share it before the end. But it was something that people found very, very helpful moving forward. So I'm going to stop the screen share here. And that's our summary. I'm going to now move right ahead and introduce Dean Holland, who is going to be performing a song for us. This is recorded. It's not live. I think I would really be anxious if we were going live with this, because there's always lots of things that can happen with that. So Dean took the time and effort to put this together. Dean is a local personality, as many of you probably know, in the field of entertainment. And he is an actor, an MC, a director, a host, and a singer. And today we're going to get to see him as a singer. And he has another talent that you'll see embedded in the song as well. I think I asked Dean for some information. You'll see he has a little intro to the song. But I did ask him to give me a little context for the introduction, and he said, "Through the toughest of times through history, entertainers and other artists and craftsfolks have undoubtedly provided various degrees of escapism for the general populace. I suppose that while the science heads of the world work hard to find solutions, they're counting on us to provide a lifting of the spirits." So with that, I'm going to go to my screen share and we'll have a listen. I would like for people during this to take a minute as you listen to Dean And think about an insight that you've learned personally or professionally about yourself during this time of the pandemic. And if you're comfortable, post it in the chat to all of us so that we can see these different insights that people have come up with. So as we're listening to the song, think about an insight that you've learned about yourself as we've gone through this very strange time together. So here we go, I'll spin a screen share. Okay.
Hey there, folks. Dean Holland here. I have been asked by the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay if I might, for today's webinar, start us off with a little bit of arts and culture. Now, as an artist, and not a brain surgeon or a university scholar, but as an entertainer, I like to think that I have the ability to bring people a bit of joy, a little bit of distraction when times are challenging, when times are troubled. And so I always hope that I can do that. This song that I've chosen, incidentally, was written by George and Ira Gershwin in the midst of the Great Depression, 1937, for a film called A Damsel in Distress, which starred Fred Astaire and a 19-year-old Joan Fontaine. The song is called Things Are Looking Up. If I should suddenly start to sing, or stand on my head or anything, don't think that I've lost my senses. It's just that my happiness finally commences. The dull ages of dull despair are turning into thin air, and it seems that suddenly I've become the happiest man alive. Things are looking up. I've been looking the landscape over, and it's covered with four-leaf clover. Oh, things are looking up since love looked up at me. Bitter was my cup, but no more will I be the mourner, 'cause I've certainly turned the corner. Oh, things are looking up since love looked up at me. See the sunbeams, everyone beams just because of you. Love's in session and my depression is unmistakably through. Things are looking up. It's a great little world we live in, and I'm happy as a pup since love looked up at me. See the sunbeams, everyone beams just because of you. Love's in session and my depression is unmistakably through. Things are looking up. It's a great little world we live in, and I'm happy as a pup since love looked up. Yes, I'm happy as a pup since love looked up at me.
That's great. Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to stop the screen share. And now I'm going to just take a minute and see what's in the chat. Christy or Marilyn, were there some things coming up from people? Fabulous, Dean, thank you. Learn to look in the woods much more. I've really started watching birds in a big way. We've had the orioles at the feeder and indigo bunting, and got bobolinks in the field, so it's exciting. Slowing down is fun, yeah. Learn to live in the moment. Okay. Great voice and whistling. That was the other skill I was going to say. People would be impressed with all of that. Every day can be a good day if you choose happiness. It's good. It's good. Okay. So people feel free to keep sharing those because I will also gather them. I get to be the person who does the notes for this session. And I will be gathering up the chat feedback. And I think it's helpful for us to be sharing that with others as we go forward. So, okay, big thanks to Dean Holland for taking the time to do that recording. And I will say he was trying to actually gather a montage of artists and images of them and have that playing while he was singing. But it became a little too complicated at the end. So he ended up doing a song for us. So thank you for that. So Marilyn, I'd like to take a minute and just introduce you. I'm just going to say, personally, Marilyn and I have worked together for 20 years, maybe, not quite, 18, on a range of different things, including innovation and network theory development. Marilyn and I reconnected in this work, which has been so fun. And she is a longtime resident of Grey and Bruce, and she works with emerging practices and the social sector. She's a great coach and supporter of that, great facilitator. So Marilyn, over to you. And I'm going to start to pull up your slides to do a screen share for you. So I'll just let you take over.
Thank you.
Mute here.
I can't whistle very well, and I ended up not being so good at the screen sharing with some computer glitch. As part of our conversation, we started to wonder, just keep hearing we're going to be short of cash. We're going to need more capital. Where's that going to come from? And so we decided that I would do really what I'm calling a Cook's tour of social finance. And there will be a more detailed social finance primer, I think, up on the website. Is that where we're going to put it once it's done, probably by the end of the week? I had the amazing good fortune for many years to have a $4 million a year portfolio with the Trillium Foundation. And that enabled me to participate on behalf of the foundation, both provincially and nationally, on the emergence of the field of social finance. And this conversation really began because of the sharp reductions in government funding and a recognition that the biggest problem for the Canadian social sector doing its job in community well-being was access to capital. So here we are again, same problem, compounded now by COVID. If you want to know how bad it is, take a quick look at Imagine Canada and the Ontario Nonprofit Network. The data on how our social organizations are faring is pretty grim. So over the last couple of weeks, I went back and had a look at what's happening in the social finance space now. And I'm going to do two things in my 10 minutes. I'm going to lead us on a Cook's tour of the social finance tools that we can use to increase access to recovery capital here, and do that so that we all get into the same conversation in a way. And the last thing I'm going to do right at the end of my 10 minutes is point to a couple of opportunities to learn together, because this is a learning time, and I think we have to learn together to figure out how to mobilize that sort of inherent small town connectivity that's such an asset here. So because this is a lightning scan of a still emerging field, those of you with access to the chat, I'd really love it if we could crowdsource this a little bit. If you have ideas or examples of social finance, either experiences or mechanisms that you don't hear in this chat, then please just add that in and we'll put it in the primer before it's finished. So first slide, thank you, Liz. Sourcing capital for social good, where does it really come from? On the business side, money flows through purchasing, lending, selling, lending, and investment. In the social sector, previously known as the nonprofit sector, it comes through traditionally granting, philanthropy, donating, and purchase of service, usually purchase of service in relationship to government. And we've watched these two sectors move closer together, really cozy up on the Canadian landscape. And in this hybrid space, has been developing this whole new ecosystem of social finance. So the nonprofit sector innovating around business kind of mechanisms to continue to be able to provide social good, its services for social good. And this doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to pursue granting, philanthropy, all that stuff. It's not an either or, it's definitely a both and that's when it starts to get kind of exciting. Liz, next slide if you would. So let's look at purchasing first. Social procurement. Every purchase has an economic, environmental, and social impact, even if we don't measure it, and we often don't. Social procurement is a practice that captures those impacts to make strategic contribution to community. This is particularly so in large-scale purchasing with businesses, institutions, and municipalities. So the bigger the purchasing power, the bigger the potential for social impact, if we tailor our purchasing so that it also captures social value. And this requires changes often, and it's really tough to do. I've tried this in a university to actually change procurement checklists. But we can do this so that the best value includes value returned also to the community. And just a little example from my own life, I worked at Ryerson, and we routinely broke Ryerson social procurement regulations to source great conference foods from minority-run social enterprises. Great food, social value, not much corporate agreement on that. Buy local, buy social initiatives are kind of the same thing, an extension of the same idea. They can be seen as direct consumer approaches to social procurement, nurturing the small business ecosystem or the food ecosystem or the make work ecosystem. Community benefit agreements. These are really an opportunity for large infrastructure contracts, read municipalities often, to include added requirements in their contracting, such as sourcing green, supporting skilled trades, or the local supply chain. So there's leverage here in our municipal budgets and municipal agreements. There's a couple of public policy initiatives, such as community employment benefits. You know, it's just an area where governments are starting to pick up now on social finance mechanisms as well. So the question in my mind is, what might municipal level procurement messaging or incentive strategies offer to support local recovery? Next one, Liz. So selling for public good. Social enterprise is probably familiar to most people. It's a business model with a social mission. We understand it to have a double or even better triple bottom line, accounting to profit, but also social and environmental value. A social enterprise reinvests at least a portion of its profit in mission. And the cool thing here is social enterprises are actually undefined in our tax structures. So they don't have to be for-profit businesses. They could also be nonprofit businesses. And some of the ones that I've worked with are actually sister organizations to registered charities. And that field is maturing so that there's some good sector definitions emerging that set standards on how much reinvestment is good practice. Corporate social responsibility will be familiar as well. It's another way of producing social value. These are self-regulating business models where companies can be accountable to the economic, social, and environmental impact of doing business and their capacity to contribute to the social good. Consumer interest has made this really important, an important growth area in the last 10 years. And one of my favorite colleagues, actually just in Toronto, accessible, I would think, Philip Haid is with the company Public Inc., who works with commercial companies to ramp up their social value. It's thanks to Philip that you can get your flu shot at Shoppers Drug Mart. And you've noticed now the quick incorporation of some of the Black Lives Matters material in the last little while. B Corps, we don't have quite so many in Canada, but these are more formal, registered organizations that are certified. Think Patagonia, think Dannon Foods, think TAS Design. So how might we engage with building social enterprises and more locally focused CSR? Lending, Liz. Community loan funds. These were new not so long ago, but in my quick web search, I see they're now established in many communities with a range of objectives such as supporting entrepreneurs into independence, enabling home ownership, or building the capacity of sector organizations. That last one might be important for us. The loans are usually small, they include capacity building, and are supported by socially minded investors. Traditionally, these loan funds actually have a better repayment track record than the commercial banks. But then, if you put a community loan fund into something called, I'm calling for the moment my words, partner loan funds, these community loan funds can partner with CSR-driven lending businesses or government even to bring these funds to scale. It brings a lot more money to the table. So just an example, City of Toronto, the Youth Microloan Pilot is funded by the city and the Community Foundation and Community Housing, but Alterna Savings is also a partner. And they provide youth in Toronto's West End priority neighborhoods with coaching, business development, training, mentoring, and small business loans. Foundation loan funds are a relatively new thing on the landscape. Typically, our foundations, community foundations and others, really just grant returns on endowed investment. There was a fair bit of pressure after the 2008 market crash when many foundations actually were unable to access their funds to grant, just as the community needed more support. Unfortunately, the last quick, desperate market turn down for COVID was a short one, but we don't know that we're out of the woods on that yet. So we see community foundations like the London Community Foundation beginning to innovate. They began making community loans in 2012. They had made a commitment of 1% of their assets. They now offer a range of financial offerings, including loans, lines of credit, letters of guarantee, and mortgages that align with mission. And some of you may know how desperately difficult it is for a nonprofit to actually acquire a mortgage. Peer-to-peer lending, a small thing, but interesting model where the broker's relationship between investors and entrepreneurs. Some of you may know the Kiva model. So who locally might be inclined to support a loan fund for regional recovery? And what partnerships might we have access to locally to take that to scale? Investing, Liz, is the next one. It's a bit of a laundry list, but it's pretty interesting to see how this ecosystem has begun to develop out. Community bonds are interest-bearing instruments that offer a combination of financial and social returns and are intended really for the small-scale community investors, those of us who can put a little bit of money from our RRSPs in there. They can only be issued by a nonprofit business. And CBs tend to inject capital, which is not tied to program, which often grants are, that enables nonprofits to leverage other investments. So when Tanya was here, she talked about the community bond that CSI launched with the municipality, the City of Toronto as a guarantor, which enabled them to acquire a bank mortgage and their Spadina location. And then they've leveraged that to purchase a second location. And they've actually got now $42 million in capital asset in play. So that gives them a kind of flexibility that nonprofits generally do not have. Impact investing. This really channels capital to drive measurable social as well as financial returns. Attracting capital to tackle social issues at scale requires an ecosystem that connects the social sector to capital markets and to these new financial tools and even newer ones. The Social Venture Exchange, or SVX at Mars, aims to create such an ecosystem. And at the community level, you might want to take a look at Vancity Credit Union. They're one of the granddaddies of social finance in this country. And they have a strategic investment framework on their website. And they say this is a quote, so Vancity Credit Union is, you can deposit your paycheck in there. We use your deposits to lend lend and invest in local businesses, organizations, and initiatives that create positive economic, social, and environmental impacts in your community. That way, we can grow your wealth while making a difference in areas such as creating jobs, reducing greenhouse gases, and fighting homelessness. McConnell Foundation's one of Canada's older foundations, very interested in innovation, very supportive. And I noticed that they too have added impact investing and impact lending actually to their financial portfolio. So what exactly that means, we have yet to discover, but there it is in black and white on their website. Angel investors, I know we have some high net worth individuals invest in new and entrepreneurial ventures, combining investment with the chance to give back to community. So particularly amenable perhaps to social value, also to mentoring, I know. And then when we move into the policy tools, we have social impact bonds. They're a bit complicated, but I for one wonder what would happen if we thought about those at the municipal level in a slightly different way than they've been thought of provincially. And there's other public policy driven instruments such as, believe it or not, Registered Disability Savings Program and Registered Education Savings Programs were both launched at the behest of the social sector moving forward on social finance kinds of strategies. So really, what if we could leverage some of this region's bigger corporations, angel investors, and municipalities, engage them in developing or engage with them in developing an investment ecosystem that supports the elements of a just recovery in this region. And we were really able to sit down and figure out what those elements would be. So last slide, Liz. We are not the only community thinking about this right now. You can believe there are others. And in my little search over the last couple of weeks at Roz's behest, I turned up this opportunity, which is tomorrow, for a community huddle. The social value marketplace is an idea that BiSocial is promoting. And some of you may know David LePage of the Young Foundation. He's very much engaged with the BiSocial folks, and is also releasing a new book any minute called Marketplace Revolution: From Concentrated Wealth to Community Capital. So there are more of us than we know out there. We could join up and learn together. And just this afternoon pops into my inbox a design challenge from Pillar Nonprofit Network. And I'll just forward this to Roz, and anyone can get it, information from her. They have had a first design challenge. This is the second one, $20,000, looking at solutions to the economic recovery in communities around COVID. So that deadline is very soon. I think it is like next week, but nonetheless, there's money on the table and there are people thinking as we are. And somehow to me, this seems to be about learning together so that we know how to act together. Thanks, Liz. Back over to you.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. That was terrific. And lots of food for thought in terms of the kinds of approaches how we begin to think about doing strategic investing in terms of mapping our road to recovery. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop our screen share here. And we're going to now move to our four panelists who are going to share some of their different perspectives from the different sectors. We have four people with us today: Tara Hunt from the business sector, Andrew Sigward from Blue Mountain Village Foundation and Blue Mountain Village Association, and other things, I'm sure. I'll do a formal introduction as we get there. Brian Saunderson from the town of Collingwood, and Ross Morrison, who's going to be helping out with these four panelists. So our first person up is Tara. And Tara, I'm going to do your slides. No, you're doing your own slides. Or I'm doing your slides. You can do them. Okay. So let me just say, Tara is the owner of Anytime Fitness in Collingwood and Midland, and is connected to the angel investing, is an angel investor. So she'll be able to talk a little bit about that. I know she's going to tell us a little bit more about herself, but I looked you up and saw this crash. You're gonna have to talk about it, but I was incredibly impressed. So over to you, Tara. Now, do you need help with your slides? Are you okay?
No, I should be okay. Thanks so much.
Over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much, Roz, for including me as part of the panelists. today. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tara Flame Hunt. My husband, Ed, and I are partners in Anytime Fitness Collingwood and Anytime Fitness Midland. And actually, Ed and I met while working as recreation therapists at Waypoint Center for Mental Health during the SARS outbreak in 2003. And yes, so despite humble beginnings, Ed and I have invested in several companies, both locally and nationally, and some are represented here on this slide. And today, regardless of industry or revenue model, I want to recognize that there will always be challenges. And this afternoon, I will briefly share with you my perspective from the business sector. So when Roz, just going to go to my next slide. So when Roz asked me to speak, she provided 3 questions in which to share my experience and expertise. The first question being, what makes an investment strategic? Second question, what pools of capital can be considered for those investments? And the third question is, how can we align objectives, pool resources, and accelerate municipal collaboration to build a more resilient and sustainable future? And so question number 1, what makes an investment strategic? And so for us, Ed and myself, an investment is strategic when the 4 P's intersect. So when people, purpose, profits, and play come together, we consider this to be a strategic investment. And this is actually a formula that I've borrowed from our Anytime Fitness co-founders. And to put it into perspective, Anytime Fitness is the largest fitness franchise with over 4,000 locations worldwide. And in 2005 and 2006, it was actually awarded the #1 franchise across all sectors by Entrepreneur magazine. So these guys know what they're talking about. What Anytime Fitness has helped us to do is essentially scale culture. And that's thanks to a mission that people can really get behind. And we like to use the adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound in cure. And our health is vital, period. I did also want to just make a shout out to our Anytime Fitness Collingwood and Midland clubs, as both of those clubs have ranked in the top 10 of all clubs in Canada. And this is thanks to both our communities for their support and shared success. So question number 2, what pools of capital can be considered for those investments? And so for me, I am a huge supporter of community collaboration, networking, access to talent pool, access to professional resources, services suppliers, as well as mentorship. These are vital to all of our successes, despite or regardless of your revenue model. And again, another adage that I'll borrow is that it truly takes a village. And if there's an opportunity that I would like to highlight, it is that we have a tremendous opportunity right now to come together and support each other. Price wars, outsourcing, devaluing the local economy affects everybody. And creating value in today's economy means owning your while propping up your neighbor. We truly are all in this together. And I see a tremendous opportunity for Collingwood and the surrounding area to really own the green innovation space and be a role model for other provincial and national communities. When looking at available capital, the 4 Ps can provide a roadmap. Who and where are the people, the talent pool, and the customers that can serve and support the company's purpose, the community's purpose? Does the company have access to all the suppliers it needs to be successful? And what are the true costs of goods sold? Does the price point support profitability? Because profitability truly provides an ecosystem of sustainability. And how much runway is needed before takeoff? The who, the what, the when, the how, and the why. We have so much incredible resources in our community. It doesn't always come down to dollars. In fact, I would argue that the last thing a company or community needs to be successful is a boatload of cash. Now, don't get me wrong, cash is king in terms of buying power, but all cash really is an energy exchange. If you don't have the cash, there are other means that you can take to find those energy resources. And I'd like to give a shout out to Collingwood Commons, as I feel that this is a great example of this. Question number 3. How can we align objectives, pool resources, and accelerate municipal collaboration to build a more resilient and sustainable future? And I think this is a 4-step process. Step number 1, identify the core values of the people living in our community. And Marilyn, you touched a little bit on this in terms of the data. Step number 2, establish a community vision and mission. This is a purpose that the people of the community can get behind. And again, I mentioned green innovation as an opportunity for our area. Step number 3 is to identify SMART as an acronym, KPIs. And this lends itself to the profitability. An example would be an accelerator hub in our community with access to mentorship, capital, and talent pool. Step number 4 is to establish a reward system or a celebration for a job well done. And this brings that 4th P, play. So I'm just going to fast forward to my next slide. Here we go. Okay, so Roz had also asked that I touch on angel investing, as I have invested through the Georgian Angel Network, as well as the Vancouver Angel Forum. So the Georgian Angel Network has a website where prospective small to medium-sized enterprises, as well as startups, can go to apply to pitch to GAN. And our managing director, Michael Badham, published a 15-point checklist. Are you ready on the website? Or sorry, are you angel ready? So if candidates meet the threshold, Michael will then add them to his watch list. And then typically 2 companies per month will pitch with a minimum of $5,000 or $25,000 investment per investor. Angel investors, for the most part, offer smart money. Typically, an angel investor comes with an entrepreneurial background experience. And as an angel investor, what I will share is typically you will have more control over the decisions being made at the boardroom or the strategic level than you would if you invested those same funds into the public market. Last fall, Michael introduced the Accelerate Fund, and this is a pooled financial injection towards becoming angel ready. And all of this and more can be found by going to the Georgian Angel Network website, getting in touch with Michael, and upon approval, even coming out. And that's it for me. So thank you. Back to you, Liz. Oh, you're just on mute, Liz. Oh,
there you go. There you go. Sorry about that. Tara, I'll just invite you. Thank you so much for your comments. That was terrific. Lots of interesting ideas shared there, and some specific things that people can do. Those 4 points, the 4 Ps, really nice framework for us to hang on to, and I'm sure we'll be able to find some ways to work some of that into the work that we're doing as we go forward. So could I just invite you to stop the screen share? There we go. Okay. And now we're going to move next to Andrew Sabre. Andrew, welcome, and so great to have you with us here today. Andrew is the president of Blue Mountain Village Association and the chair of the Blue Mountain Village Foundation. So Andrew, over to you.
Oh, thanks for having me, and welcome to everyone on the line today. You know, when I spoke with Rosalind and Liz earlier, they asked me to share some insights really on what we've learned through the pandemic and what are some of the things we need to be thinking about going forward. So in my work with the Blue Mountain Village Foundation, you know, we have what I would say is a very consistent and well-worn process for raising funds, providing grants, and helping to support social agencies in the community. And it's one of those operations that I think we very much took for granted that it would function the way it normally does, and because it has been working for so long and delivering consistent results. But in the backs of our minds, we have been thinking about the need to diversify, to change, and to find new processes so that we can be adaptive as an organization and to not take for granted that our events-based revenue generation for grants would still be possible and relevant. So, as we were pre-pandemic, we were already exploring ideas around collaboration first, finding ways to connect with our social agency partners to understand what issues are, which could then drive a more robust and responsive approach to granting, and learning a little more from the ground before we go out to give grants to understand what the kind of issues are of the day. So fast forward to the beginning of the year, and the pandemic took hold. And we realized very quickly that there were some acute needs in the community. And what we were able to do very quickly, in the span of 3 weeks, in fact, was devise a new granting process, communicate to our stakeholders and community, retool our criteria, and have money in the hands of social agencies, all within a 3-week period. And the reason that we were able to do that, truthfully, was because the situation allowed us to think differently. So we were almost unlocked from the long-term discussion we had on how are we going to evolve and innovate to realizing, well, we really have to do it now because the organizations need our help and the community need was acute, especially in the early days. One of the other things that we did through that process is we tried to understand what the barriers are to a very traditional social model, which is granting, as Marilyn was highlighting earlier. And oftentimes we found around our board table that sometimes the red tape, the bureaucracy, the grant writing, the time that things takes, we were probably missing some very responsive and creative organizations who might not have that skill set or expertise. So we decided to rewrite the rule book. We created a 1-page grant. We created 3 very basic criteria, and we sort of, it was sort of like a speed grant is really what we promoted, and said, look, give us your ideas. What is the need that you see? How are you going to creatively address it? And then I think the germane to some of this discussion today is we actually added into our criteria set, how are you collaborating and partnering with different agencies to make an impact? So, weaving into those systems, those ideas of collaboration and coming together. So it was a very successful approach and initiative. And it was really, at the end of the day, it was a tactical deployment, but it is now leading us to think in different ways in terms of how we can learn from that experience and perhaps change and evolve our strategic thinking. Some of the things that we've learned through the pandemic and through this crisis, both in the context of the foundation, but also in my work at the Village Association and in various community groups, is that clarity and direct communication is very critical. It really matters in a crisis, but it also matters even more during day-to-day operations. And that courage to be clear and direct and to challenge issues head on is something that we've learned really suits us well. Regional collaboration for us has always been at the center of our operating philosophy. Many of you have seen conversations we've had or heard of our discussions around the labor supply challenges of a number of years ago, our collaboration on developing an attainable housing framework. We've sort of taken that approach in the past that regardless of the municipal boundaries, county boundaries, and all the various sort of cohorts we find ourselves in, if we look at the problem together, that will bring the partners together as opposed to trying to work within our networks and frameworks. So that was helpful. What helped us and what has been helping us in terms of collaboration is actually focusing on capacity and not and not perhaps our former wheelhouses or territories. So if I would think pre-pandemic, there are things that we have been working on as an organization to share protocols among different tourism destinations, as an example. There might have been a time when we looked at that and thought, well, Collingwood Municipality will take care of that group. Blue Mountains will do what they need to do. Village will do what we need to do, and you know, good luck to the rest of them. And post-pandemic, we realized who in our ecosystem has the most capacity, the most best practices, and the ability to actually staff and create some of those tools and then to easily distribute them. So what we found were there were different folks who came together to shield that work, and it had nothing to do with who should be doing what or who had the mandate to do what. It was more driven by who has the capacity and the expertise and the resources, and let's all support that entity to get the job done. So there are a number of examples where we've done that. One is preparing a pandemic readiness resource for small businesses so that people can apply the same safety protocols across a restaurant, a retail store, and experience. And we worked with Mayor Saunderson, Mayor Soever, different BIAs and destination partners to actually share the same resource so that across the region, we can be really working from the same set of protocols. So, you know, some really good examples on how when we look at capacity first, when it matters rather than our old paradigms or our turf, so to speak, we can get more done. And I think that's a lesson that we'll be bringing forward as we go. And I think the networks we form, as we said during our pre-call, will be a little different. As I talked a little about our rapid grant was a tactic, our strategy going forward is going to be learning what we learned from the pandemic, understanding that we're not going to be relying on necessarily events-based fundraising for the future. It's really going to unlock a lot of opportunities for us to figure out how we can become a better supporter of social agencies. So we don't have the answers to that yet, but we have a couple of examples on where we've been able to really drive change. So we're looking forward to deploying that going forward. What do we need to be thinking about going forward? Well, we have to figure out how to retool our processes so that we don't actually lose these learnings. So one of the things that keeps me awake at night is that we've all had these great insights through this experience. And then as soon as things feel like they go back to normal, we tend to forget. So post-SARS, we had a very different outlook on what we needed to do to change. And you know, 15 plus years later, we found ourselves in some of the same situations we were in pre-SARS. So for me, it's actually about not just taking this as a holiday from reality, but actually changing the reality going forward. And that's something that I think we all need to be thinking about. One of the slides earlier talked about how this experience has maybe demonstrated the cracks. What I think is it's one of the things I would add to that is that I think what it has demonstrated is what skills are most important in resilience and in leading organizations. And that's either at the organization level and at the people level. So for me, what I've observed will be the new normal that I'll be bringing forward to every interview and every discussion I have with a partner, an employee, a team member is, how adaptable are you? What is your assertiveness level? Do you have a bias toward action? Do you have expertise in navigating shades of gray? That I have realized is such an uncomfortable place for people, especially when you're in crisis mode. But the reality is shades of gray is where we all have to thrive. So that's been a real aha moment for me. Listening, collaboration, and self-awareness. When we did that little experience earlier about you know, what have we learned when we were listening to Dean, what have we learned about ourselves? One of the things that I've learned is I have a tendency to be quite reactive. And in the moment that can really be a challenge. So I've been learning to listen more, and I encourage everyone to be as self-aware as possible. It's great to focus on all the positive things we do, but I think we have to look deep within to find out where we're actually missing the mark and have the courage to admit it. So we're doing a fair bit of work on that. Going forward, the regional approach that we've been talking about, and I've seen it woven through a lot of the programming that the South Georgian Bay Institute does, to me is fundamental and fundamentally required. And I actually believe that we need a new organization or entity, or perhaps this organization and entity, to find ways to raise capital, to raise funds, to have people and infrastructure, so that we can take this regional approach and actually drive it through, circling back to my earlier comment, so to drive it through capacity. And so, volunteer networks get us so far. I think we all need to figure out how to commit some budget and dollars to setting up that type of agency who can lead and grow those. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. And as it relates to our foundation, trying to figure out how we can be a part of that investment and migrate from a more traditional granting approach to something that's a bit more robust. So looking forward to participating in that.
Just unmuting. I should sort of anticipate that more. Okay, thank you very much.
I forget every time still after every Zoom call I've been on.
I know, it's like you don't want to be creating noise in the background when someone's speaking, and on the other hand, you don't want to waste people's time either. But
Yeah.
Anyway, Andrew, I just want to say thank you very much. Very insightful thoughts, and exciting to be thinking about how the region can start to really maybe start to weave together some of the things that already exist. Maybe some things need to be new, create some bridges in some ways, open up some more communication. And there's been now lots of practice in how people have been sharing and doing things in new ways. And to your point, a network approach really does, like, everyone knows in the network, like, who's got the greatest capacity for this? Okay, like, do it, go. And it's not necessarily, as you said, in our wheelhouse. So I really appreciate that. And thank you very much for your comments and for your personal reflection as well. We're all learning and struggling as we move through this, and who knows what's going to come in the fall. And I think as we've said all along, it's good to be in this together and working together on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to now move to introduce Brian Saunderson. Brian is the co-chair of the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force for the town of Collingwood. He's also the mayor. So Brian, welcome. So good to have you with us. And I'll hand it over to you. I'm just conscious a little bit of our time, so we'll just keep moving ahead.
Thank you, Liz. And thank you, Rosalind and the Institute, for this invitation. It's an important topic, and today I'm representing the 9 business leaders of our community that took part in our task force and offered their expertise and experience to really come back with 35 recommendations in a very short period of time, about 3.5 weeks. Which I think are incredibly creative, proactive, impactful, and we're looking forward to working at council with staff to implement these and work with our BIA and all our business stakeholders. And I think, as has been pointed out before, this is when I talk about local, I think we're really talking about regional, and we're looking at ways to implement things that will very much cross the boundaries. Whether it be from Simcoe County to Grey County, or from Collingwood to Town of Blue Mountains, or Collingwood to Wasaga Beach, or Collingwood to Clearview. I was at a talk and I referred to our region as an Oreo cookie. The Town of Blue Mountains and Wasaga are the wafers, and we are the Oreo middle, and everyone knows the best way to eat an Oreo is from middle out. So we're very much part of an effort, I think, on this. And so Roz had given me a couple of questions to guide me in the discussion. And the first one is, what is my perspective on a guiding principle that we should consider when we look at investing in our recovery, stabilization, and our communities? And that one, I think there was a mirror image of that question asking us, what is the process now municipally? So I think those two questions go together. They're the same, two sides of the same coin, and by changing the tense from is to was, I can talk about what I think I viewed our municipal role in investing 8 months ago versus now. And much of what I'm going to talk about is what I learned from our local business experts. So to give a bit of background about the municipal context, in my opinion, a municipality is really a public corporation, and we are publicly owned by our resident taxpayers, and they judge their return on investment by deciding whether or not they're getting value for service on their tax dollars. and taxpayers get to vote once every 4 years. So that's when they get to tell us whether or not we've been doing a good job. And in between that period of time, the council members are the ones that decide how we're going to invest our taxpayers' money annually and when I say invest, I mean any type of expenditure, whether it being investing in a program, purchasing equipment, hiring staff, or putting it in a reserve fund for future investment. And so what I think properly done, and I think what Collingwood's been doing in the last 6 years since I've been involved in this sector, is using our community-based strategic plan to set forward our priorities, and that is our roadmap for how we invest and how we weigh the benefit of an investment when we're looking at spending tax dollars. And so 8 months ago, when we were talking around the council table, we were looking at sustainability in all its forms, whether that be social, economic, I'm losing it, sorry, just excuse me. Social, economic, cultural, or environmental. And so we've been trying to work on all of those issues. And so from the economic perspective, we were working on an action plan to make Collingwood a hub for sustainability, which goes to the green economy. We were promoting Collingwood as a great place to live and work, and we were looking to make Collingwood investment ready. So we were trying to work with our local stakeholders in the public sector at making Collingwood investment ready. On the environmental front, we were looking at a corporate green plan. We were looking at our measuring our carbon footprint, setting targets, and we had done things like an urban forest management plan and trying to work at our footprint and making us a sustainable community, both in our practices and on water. And socially, we were funding the Out of the Cold program. We were working with the county and our other partners at housing initiatives, and working to access funding from upper levels of government to make sure that those were being serviced, and working to understand our local needs. And we were very much in the genesis, I think, of that process. And in the last, I would say, 2 months, we have come a long way down that path. And culturally, we were supporting local arts and working with culture groups. We were partnering with the Simcoe Street Theatre to operate the Simcoe Street Theatre. And we were looking at a feasibility study for a larger culture center. So when we look at that, those were all being done with what I would call the traditional framework for a municipality. And we were operating almost sort of as a removed third party. We were looking through policy at ways that we could impact and influence our economy and local businesses without actually becoming part of that ecosystem. We were looking at ways that we could invest through expenses or programs to promote those things. But again, we were looking at it, it was almost a fenced in, I think, kind of approach. There were boundaries and we didn't want to color outside those boundaries. And so if we look now at what's happened over the last 2 months, I would say, to 10 weeks with the COVID pandemic, I think it has been a huge disruption. I think it has really knocked apart the way we look at what our role is as a municipality. And we've had to go places that I'm not sure. I mean, well, I think we're not comfortable right now. We're finding our way. There is no script for this, and we're trying to work, and we have to work collaboratively with the other stakeholders in our communities to find a way to make sure that we are supporting our economy, we're supporting our businesses, and that we are going to be part of the process to help jumpstart the economy and support the economy as we get going in whatever form that takes. And we're all learning as we go and as the announcements are made. And so I think we are really having to look at what is the role of a municipal corporation and what are the types of investments we're prepared to make. And I think those boundaries have blurred tremendously since we've gone into this COVID process. So our council struck an economic task force with 9 local business leaders from all sectors of our economy. And I should say that I think Collingwood and our region is in a fairly strong position. When Maclean's magazine ranked us as the 22nd best place to live in Canada, what they observed is that 66% of our working residents work in Collingwood. And for a community our size with 24,000 people, that's quite an accomplishment. So we have that circular economy in place, and I think we need to work at leveraging that as we move forward on a regional basis. to make sure we're in a strong position, I think, to really protect ourselves and to strengthen ourselves. And the mandate of the task force, as they iterated it, was to look at making Collingwood a stronger, more resilient community and economy coming out of the COVID. So not just looking at how we can survive the COVID, but making ourselves stronger and more resilient moving forward. And at the same time, Council created a $2.5 million contingency fund to sort of put a fence around what it is we were looking at investing in. So of the 35 recommendations that came back to Council on May 19, we're now looking at how we're going to implement those with staff and the community. But I think what I've really noticed, and I think what I'll take away from this, is that the primary change in the municipal decision-making process around investment is that I think the traditional and long-standing boundaries under the Municipal Act and under the various tools available to us to regulate and influence the economy, I think we've gone beyond that now. And so I think we need to look at interacting with our local businesses and being an actual participant and in ways that we invest our money. And so I guess the issue is, what would that look like? And I think we saw through the 35 recommendations that came from our task force, there's some simple ones that Andrew referred to, which is looking at a sort of a code of conduct or a shopping code to restore consumer confidence. If you come to Collingwood, you will be in a safe environment to shop, so you can get out to the stores, so you can enjoy the coffee houses and the restaurant patios. And so what does that look like? Hand washing stations, proper PPE, which could include face masks, and what would the store staff be wearing, setup of the store, proper separation between people, proper ability to make sure that we have safe streets and sidewalks. So we're looking at things like street closures and closing the angled parking to allow for increased pedestrian traffic flow in the downtown, so that shopping is easier and it's easier to social distance, and that the shops can have pop-up venues outside their stores as well to give more space. And we've been looking at things we've been involved through our local Optimist Club with creating up a supply chain for PPE to make sure that there is PPE suppliers for our businesses to access and for our residents to access. And what originally rose on a social basis to make sure that the hospital and our seniors' homes had proper PPE is now blossomed into a much bigger endeavor, where we're now looking at supplying our businesses as well. And we have one local business that retooled a plant and has been producing surgical masks and may get into that business in a much bigger way. So that's kind of an opportunity that has arisen there. So I think as a municipality, we've really been thrust into the forefront to look at ways to work with our businesses and strengthen our economy as a participant and not sort of as this policy regulator. And that we need to look at proactively investing taxpayers' monies in ways that we can stimulate and shape our economy. And so two of the recommendations that the task force has looked at, and one was in discussion, but with our asset sale proceeds, looking at the creation of a community foundation. The community foundation can provide operating dollars for our social services. And through the course of the COVID, our town staff has actually assembled a round table of social service providers. 50 plus members are at that table now, so we're getting a better idea of what's going on in our community, where there are synergies, where there are gaps. And so, as I said, that's really brought us forward in our social agenda, which was a big part of our strategic plan, but now because of COVID has really forced that issue to the front, and we've been able to work cooperatively to establish that group. And so that is very much a benefit for our community, but also for us as a municipality to understand what investments are needed in that area. And another aspect of the community foundation is to look at getting matching dollars so people in our community can walk with their checkbooks, that if there are capital projects they want done, we can start setting those aside. We have been approached by a number of residents who are interested in the matching dollar program. So it gives us a way, I think, to work with our residents and our businesses to try to achieve projects that otherwise, if left just to the municipality, would take longer. So we're becoming more proactive and interactive with our businesses that way and our residents. We're also looking at establishing a community investment fund. In Ontario, that does not yet exist, but in New Brunswick, it is in a form where it's recognized by the Securities Commission out there and the government, and you can get tax receipts for donations. So that allows our residents to become investors in our community and to support local startups or local businesses, and to be recognized through that. So through their charitable donation receipts. So that's an opportunity for us to leverage again and work with our community at trying to explore how we can go down that road. And we know that we are a community that the water is in our DNA. We were a shipbuilding community, but now can we leverage that to turn us into a green sector for community water technology? And we've seen that in some degree with the Smart Sump group that's created a smart sump pump that will read the weather, and it will release the water in your sump pump, so that when the rains come, you will actually take water out of the storm sewer system, and then you can use that water for your own benefits, whether it be watering the garden, or technically we could be looking at projects to collect water in cisterns under garages, and you can use that gray water to flush your toilets and do laundry. So you're not paying and using purified municipal water to do things that you don't need that for. So there's opportunities, I think, and through the accelerator that we're looking at getting involved with to make ourselves a green technology hub with water technologies first and foremost, but there's other opportunities there too. So what I think has really come to the fore in my mind through working with the exceptional people on our task force and seeing those business minds at work is seeing a much broader horizon for municipal corporations to be involved proactively as a dynamic investor and participant in the local economy, as opposed to sort of this wired off or fenced off group that is looking at trying to influence things through policy and regulation. I think this is an opportunity for us, and it does come with some trepidation. It's not something we're comfortable doing in the municipal sector, but I think it's something that we need to develop, we need to figure out, and put in the safe checks and balances that our taxpayers would want. But I think it presents a huge opportunity for us. And so disruption has really pushed us to that place.
That's terrific. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. It's quite a journey of moving from that kind of, here's the way we've always thought about ourselves and inside the box thinking, and starting to actually shift towards some of these new areas. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm not going to do too much of a summary there, but I did catch a lot of the detail in the notes, and I know we'll be able to share that. I'm going to just say, Marilyn Struthers and I did some research at one point, and we learned that people really feel like they make a very good investment. No, it's a great grant or a great investment when you take a big risk. That was how they defined it. And they mitigated that risk by having the right people around the table and using their network and having the right leverage pieces and working on that. So it feels like we're all moving into new ground, but I think we're actually going to have some much bigger benefits as a result of that. So, and it keeps us nimble and responsive and really attuned to what's going on, listening carefully on the ground, if you're that investor on the ground. So thank you very much for coming with us and being with us today and sharing that piece. And I think in the chat, we have a link, or can get a link to that report if people are interested about that. I know, Roz, you were going to reference that as well. I don't know if that got posted yet. So with that, I'm going to hand it now over to Roz, who's going to speak from the philanthropic sector. And Roz, I'm going to say we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'd love to, and I know you're going to speak for 5, so then we can use the rest of the time to be thinking for the participants. And I'm going to ask you to start sharing and thinking about that as Roz is talking, because we've been filled with lots of ideas. Are there some things that are bubbling up? What's really resonating with you? If you were 10 times more innovative, what would be the action you would recommend to the Institute and collectively to the leadership group that's been pulling this together to actually move this ahead? So into the chat, participants, it would be terrific for you to start to share some of those thoughts. And I know Roz will intrigue you with some more insights as we go. So over to you, Roz. Roz, you need to unmute. I'm glad it's not just me.
I'm just going to leave it on forever. No, I was just saying that I'm really jazzed about the conversation, that that this disruption, as horrible as it is provoking us to be thinking differently. The blurring of boundaries and the risk-taking is extremely important. And I think that philanthropy has taken a leadership role in many cases to help accelerate that kind of shift forward. So I just wanted to share with you a few stories about that, but also say that, Brian, I really appreciate the work of Collingwood's Economic Support and Recovery Task Force, because you know, there's lots of recommendations in there, and I think that there are several themes and action items that could be considered very strategic depending on the hoped for outcomes. So, you know, things like the Social Services Roundtable, I think that's brilliant, and I think that we should think about perhaps multiple roundtables for the major sectors. I know that there's one for business, and now there's one for social services. You know, what about, you know, the municipal government's roundtable regionally? What about the philanthropic roundtable, and what might that look like? So that kind of new thing could lead to very strategic investments. The livability report, you know, what kind of data are we gathering to actually look at our progress? That's another great idea. We've got your concept that you mentioned about the community foundation and trying to figure out, well, what role would that play? We're talking about investing in strengthening and leveraging the cultural fabric of the community. And that investment is one that I don't think has been explored in depth, but it's certainly on the Institute's radar in terms of looking at a regional arts and culture strategy that could give some real depth to your hoped for investment. I do hope that someone is posting the link to that Recovery Task Force recommendations, because it's something that we should all be taking a look at and learning from right across the region. So that when we do look at the other recovery plans locally that are being unveiled, we know that there's going to be major investments in hoping to get traditional businesses back up and running as soon as possible. And that's a very important thing to do. And if we thought about regional strategic investments, understanding that our economy is made up of those four major sectors: business, nonprofits, government, and philanthropy, you know, what would a regional strategic investment look like? What would we collectively invest in? How would we ensure that our unique place, this place we call Southern Georgian Bay, is nurtured and sustained? What would we invest in to ensure that we can retain our talented next generation and attract more to help us address with increasing challenges that we're facing in the 21st century? Or the big question, what could we invest in to help nurture a whole decade of well-being? So some of the ideas we've explored in this series, Mapping Our Road to Recovery, which could help accelerate progress on some of those ideas, is building a regional community investment strategy that engages and leverages municipalities and corporate support. What about creating ways to think about new public-private charitable partnerships to create a community benefit fund? How do we access some of the new funding streams that Marilyn talked about that could drive social innovation right across the region? Collective impact, social finance, all of those great concepts. The measures that are in the Collingwood plan, how do we identify what those measures of success look like? And so if Collingwood wants to be known as the place for green innovation, Brian, as you mentioned, you know, what would the measures be on that front? And how do we consider investing in a regional arts and culture strategy? I think that we've had many good points brought forward about the real importance and the dependence we all have on arts and culture, and how our tourism industry is also dependent on that. So I really feel that now's a compelling time to recalibrate. not only individually, but also collectively. And how do we together create these innovative solutions to the issues that we're currently facing, but also some issues that we've been facing for a really long time. So I think that we're all seeing a growing sense of urgency to act, reflected in articles, in social media, in the news, indeed in our own streets here, about the need for building back better, taking this opportunity to innovate through this pandemic and beyond. People do want a more resilient, equitable, inclusive, and sustainable future. I want to tell you 3 short stories about the role philanthropy has taken to accelerate and address some big ideas and big challenges that were being faced. The first one was in response to the devastating effects of Hurricane Sandy in New York. The Rockefeller Foundation, along with many partners, developed the Resilient Cities Project. And why was it important? It was important because it recognized that we're facing chronic challenges and issues, but we're also facing increasing crises. And so how do we operate together with the major sectors in harmony, thinking about how do we actually deal with increasingly erratic weather and flooding patterns due to climate change? How do we develop solutions that could have the most impact? And so they pulled together the 4 major sectors: business, nonprofit, charitable, government, and philanthropic, and they developed the idea of investing in social infrastructure, a new staff position for municipalities called a Chief Resilience Officer. So one of the lessons that I want us to be thinking about is, what is the social infrastructure that we're investing in? A new position, whether it be in one of the new sectors of, whether it be in a sector like government, or it's in business, or it's in the not-for-profit, but how do we invest in that kind of social infrastructure that's going to take us to a new place? Not only were 100 resilience strategies created around the world, but also a global learning network was created. So in our region, how do we create the tables where we can learn together? And some of us will decide to lead a particular initiative, but we'll all learn together on that. Second example was from SARS. People have mentioned that more than once in today's presentation. When SARS hit Toronto in 2003, a multi-sector collaboration came together to attract tri-level government support, along with a number of leading artists and arts administrators, to figure out, how do we attract tourists back to Toronto? So we can learn from all of those previous situations that have happened around the world. And I would encourage all of us, because we know we're going to be developing that big tourism strategy, to think about the role of arts and culture in that. And the third example is from a few years ago, when the Toronto Foundation realized that more trust, connections, and neighborhood supports were needed to accelerate progress on addressing chronic issues and increasing crises. So the foundation led a multi-sector collaboration to explore how to work best together, how to develop deeper social capital and invest in grassroots neighborhood projects. And through that work, a number of partnerships are ongoing and neighborhood initiatives continue to be funded. So I'll close with a few questions that have been rolling around in my mind. Could recovery strategies regionally consider the idea of equitable investment in the 4 major sectors of business, nonprofit, charities, government, and philanthropy? And what would that look like? How robust are these 4 sectors, and what gaps might we have if we want to collaborate across the region and become a truly resilient region in the 21st century? And finally, have we fully yet unlocked the power of philanthropy? So I leave those thoughts with all of us and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Okay, now that's the last one to do. Of course, I'm on with the unmute button right away, so that's good. Learned as I went. So I'm conscious of the time. It's 6 o'clock, everyone, and I know some of you will have to go. Roz, thank you very much for your comments and for your reflections. I think they really build on and kind of set the tone for where we're headed next, and build on the comments that we heard from all of our presenters today. So thank you to Marilyn, to Tara, to Andrew, and to Brian, and to you, Roz, for taking the time to prepare your thoughts, to reflect, to bring your unique perspective to this. It's a microcosm of the bigger thing that's happening out there as we start to really adjust to where we are and what we need to do next. And to be ready for more uncertainty if we get another wave, for instance, and how we'll go on an ongoing way, be able to collectively manage that well to try and mitigate the downside of it. So I want to stop and just say, we have our next session on the 24th of June. We're already, which is 2 weeks from today, we're already lining up the speakers for that. It's really with the focus on how do we work together. So that social infrastructure idea, I think we can start to really build on, and I'm excited about that. So if you have additional ideas about that, please post them in the chat now while we go, or you can always send comments through the website for the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. That's tisgb.ca, right? .ca. .com. Okay, sorry. So that's how you'll find them. And you can also sign up for their newsletter there to find out about these kinds of sessions and future ones that will be held. Also, if you are, as you registered, interested in getting more involved in the work that we're engaged in here, we are going to be starting to reach out to people now and into the summer with potential working groups and other ways that you can get involved. So signing up for the newsletter is the greatest way to hear about how those opportunities will be rolling out, but we also will be back in touch directly with people. Roz, is there anything else I need to share at this point?
I think you covered it all, Liz, and I just want to thank you so much for hosting this session.
Okay.
And encourage everyone to join us again on June 24th. We are in this together.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. And maybe you'll have to just do a little whistle today at some point, or practice your whistle, or learn how to whistle, which would be my challenge. Okay, thank you, everyone. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the community and also working together with you going forward. Bye-bye.